for me, and we'll be able to get through this. Okay, now, first of all, let me say that I owe this topic to one of our members, Jane Gray, who expressed her interest in this artist. And to be perfectly honest with you, at the time, I didn't know a whole lot about her. So I really enjoyed this research, and I am very happy that I can give this presentation to you. I've learned a lot, and I love being introduced to an artist that I was not very familiar with previously. Now, I've entitled this, Now What, Part 6. I think this is Part 6, could be Part 7. I'm losing track now of the series. But I've titled it, The Heavy Price of Bad Advice. So let me ask you, have you ever had an idea that seemed quite significant and which you entertained frequently, but never did anything with, only to see that idea expressed by someone else? Or have you ever wanted to learn something, or experience something, or achieve something, and actually started down the path, but took the well-meaning advice of family or friends and hesitated, didn't follow through to completion, or didn't even start? And have you ever been worried about what other people might think of your ideas, your plans, your dreams? If any of the above are true for you, then you may relate to our artist du jour. You may have heard of the three fathers of abstract art, Wassily Kandinsky, Piet Mondrian, and Kazimir Malevich. But have you heard of the mother of abstract art? Hilma af Klint was born on October 26, 1862, near Stockholm, Sweden. She came from an aristocratic family, her father a naval commander and professor. She was well educated in botany, astronomy, and mathematics, but she chose art, and she trained at the Royal Academy of Fine Arts in Stockholm from 1882 to 1887. Hilma af Klint, here we go. She showed talent, as you can see right here, at a very young age. She painted this work that you see around the age of, I'd say, 19. She graduated from the Academy with honors and was gifted with a studio by the Academy, which was a very prestigious award. Hilma could paint with the best of artists from her generation. Hilma af Klint, based on her obvious early talents, intelligence, and work ethic, should have become a household name in the art world. But she was tripped up and felled by the insidious enemy of all of us who wish to make our impact in the world, and that is the well-intentioned advice and opinions of others. Now, let me clear up something right off the bat in case you're wondering. The Swede Hilma af Klint is not related to Austrian painter Gustav Klimt, Klimt with an M in place of Hilma's Klint with an N. Just want to clear that up right off the bat in case there's any speculation on your part. Hilma early on discovered the ideas of theosophy, a philosophy that was very prevalent in the late 19th century and early 20th century. And this became her spiritual tradition. She was also influenced by the Rosicrucians, an esoteric and secretive Christian organization seeking to transform society and culture. She and 4 other women in the Theosophical Society formed a small group they called the Five. These women participated in seances. Yes, seances. Now that seems strange and superstitious to us today, but this was actually quite common in Victorian times and all throughout the Western world. And it was particularly common among the upper classes, the well-educated classes. At this time, a strange thing began to happen to Hilma's art. She began to feel pushed, prodded, guided even to express her spiritual and mental life abstractly in her art. She had a spiritual guide and muse that guided her toward her abstract work, whose name was Amaliel. She had other spirit guides, but Amaliel was the main one. Now, those of you who come from the Catholic tradition of saints will know that people pray and seek guidance from many saints, but they usually have a favorite go-to saint. And so the same was true for Hilma. Her early abstract works date at least as early as 1906. Hardly anyone saw these works during her lifetime. What you're seeing now is perhaps the first abstract painting in Western art. This was an immediate experience for Hilma. No preparation of canvas, preliminary sketching, just automatic painting, believing she was guided by spirits. Now, on the left is a strange alien-looking, I guess, ship or bug-like creature. But note the W and the U. These letters will appear in several works. In her journal, she represented several meanings for each letter, but for simplicity's sake, one symbolic meaning for W was matter, and for the U, spirit. And on the right, we see spirals, which frankly remind me of Slinkies, those toys that were popular in the 70s and 80s. The spiral, though, will be a recurring motif and seems to represent human evolution. The colors also had symbolic meaning. Yellow was the masculine for the most part. It could represent other things. Blue, the feminine, and it could represent other things as well. And then, of course, green represented the union of these energies. This idea of duality, eventually overcome by union, is part of the perennial philosophy of theosophy, her spiritual tradition and perspective. And it is present in all the major religious and spiritual traditions. Hilma continued to claim throughout her life that she just painted what her spirit guides were telling her to paint. Her journals indicate she came to understand the symbolic language of the colors and forms and letters she was painting. Notice here that the W is joined to another W. We see that in the middle of the snail-like spiral is a U. So within these paintings is, according to Hilma's understanding, an esoteric spirit language. Whenever that W and U have united, which you can see in this painting, we have spiritual union. This was salvation in her spiritual philosophy, the union of all dualities. She said once, "The pictures were painted directly through me, without preliminary drawings and with great power. I had no idea what the pictures would depict, and still I worked quickly and surely without changing a single brushstroke." Now, when you look at some of these other paintings, you might have a little bit of skepticism about that statement. Hilma af Klint was performing automatic painting, which, like automatic writing, is a quick, uncensored, uninhibited, and unrestricted exercise of creation. It is believed that by not letting the conscious mind, and in particular our ego, interfere in the creative process, a deeper and more expansive reservoir of material will express itself. Some of this material may be in the unconscious, and some may be from a different realm entirely. A year later, she began painting a series based on the stages of human development. 10 of those paintings were on a very large scale, completed in only 42 days. They are, of course, referred to as the 10 largest. And as you can tell, large is almost an understatement for these works. Here is how she described her commission from the spirits that she called the leaders. 10, and if I bumble this word, I think it was invented, to be honest with you, but if I bumble this word, I apologize. 10 paradisically beautiful paintings were to be executed. The paintings were to be in colors that would be educational, and they would reveal my feelings to me in an economical way. It was the meaning of the leaders to give the world a glimpse of the system of 4 parts in the life of man. They are called childhood, youth, adulthood, and old age. Here is the first stage, childhood. Now I'm going to show you two paintings from each stage and let you simply observe them for a few moments in silence. Take a good look at each image. And after the old age stage, I'll chime back in. Now, in looking at these, you probably noticed the archetypal imagery of spirals, floral shapes, circles, squares, and symbolic lettering and numbering. You may have also noticed the vibrancy of the colors. The colors are ripe with meaning as well. Blue, besides being a symbol of feminine energy that we saw earlier, represents childhood. Orange, youth. Violet, adulthood. And then pink and fuchsia or red, whatever this color is, as old age. According to her journals, Hilma believed that if she was faithful to the spirit of these leaders seeking to paint through her, that her paintings would express the life behind the form. Now, what are we to make of Hilma's claim that spirits literally painted through her or directly guided her work? I guess it's not any different to what some writers have claimed in modern times, as well as ancient times, that they are channeling the words of a muse. If some of us can't accept these works coming from spirits such as a Malevich, where did they come from? I guess her subconscious is the best candidate. But psychoanalyst, Carl G. Jung, whose ideas we have employed recently, you should be familiar with him by now, would claim that even our subconscious doesn't invent solely from the storehouse within an individual, but its imagery is under the influence of universal archetypal images and symbols that exist outside the human psyche. And that's what makes them universal. Well, let's now compare her work to that of her contemporary, Wassily Kandinsky. Here is what is considered the first abstract painting, a watercolor by the artist. He is known as the father of abstraction because he was, for a long time, deemed the first. But he didn't create his first abstract works until 1910 or 1911, when this watercolor, known as first abstraction, was presented. I'd like to point out that with the big three abstract artists, they went through very discernible stages toward abstraction. It was a developmental process. Kandinsky gradually went from realism to more and more abstraction before he finally came to works like this. Composition 5. This was the first abstract work that caught the attention of the public, and why Kandisky became known as the father of abstract art. The mother of abstraction, because of her concerns about her works that they would be not received well, would not come to the public's attention until 4 decades after her death. Unlike her peers, Kandinsky, Mondrian, and Malevich, whose artistic development toward abstraction can be seen, Hilma's shift from objective landscapes and portraits to these abstract and surreal works are sudden, showing no stages of development. That tells me that her seances, her spiritual encounters and experiences, her mediumship, whatever it was, were very real to her. So real that she went straight from pure objectivity to pure abstraction. How else can we explain the sudden transition to pure abstraction or surrealism, however you want to describe it, that have no precedent in her work or the work that she could have been exposed to? An unfortunate counter, as far as we are concerned, in 1908 may have been the biggest reason her works remain hidden from our eyes for so long. Hilma idolized one of the leaders of the Theosophical movement, the Austrian philosopher and spiritual thinker Rudolf Steiner. And on her invitation, Steiner visited her in Sweden in 1908 and looked at her work. Steiner was critical on 2 fronts. He said he did not believe mediumship was a good strategy for creating art. And I don't think many of us would disagree with that. He said art should come directly from the life and perspective of the artist herself. Second, Steiner thought the public was not ready for her work. In fact, he put a prophetic expanse of time on it, 50 years before the public was ready to see it. And that meant only in the year 1958 should her work be revealed for the benefit of all. Unfortunately, it would be later than that by over 2 decades. Stung by his comments, she put away her paintbrushes for 4 years. And she took to heart that the public would never be ready for her art during her lifetime. The helpful advice, and I put helpful in quotes here, the helpful advice of others can be a curse. Sometimes we must trust our own gut, let our own intuition guide us. Hilma, though, hesitated and succumbed to the advice of her mentor. Now, we can't blame her, for so many of us would have done the exact same thing. So Steiner should not receive all the blame. Hilma's other friends were telling her the same. Perhaps Hilma also feared a negative reaction, and that overwhelmed her own intuition and the guidance of her spirit friends to show her art to the world. But here's what that fear cost her, if it was fear. If she had put her work out there to at least the art world, she would have received immediate feedback, and most likely a negative response initially. Let's not fool ourselves. The art world always initially rejects the radically new and different. But she also would receive the almost certain interest of other artists who would have offered their perspectives, which could have helped her develop her abstract aesthetic much more quickly. Of course, she would not have described this as her aesthetic, but the aesthetic of the spirits. But still, I believe the feedback would have enhanced her work and artistic career. Now, in contrast to Hilma, Wassily Kandinsky put his new abstract experimental work out there and enjoyed the benefit of the opinions of his fellow artists and the benefit of their publicizing of his work as well. Well, fortunately, Hilma began picking up her brushes again around 1912. From 1913 to 1915, Klint painted works that were intended to go into an actual theosophical temple. Hence, they are often referred to as her temple series. Part of that series was a group referred to as the Tree of Knowledge. You may recall the Tree of Knowledge is from the Garden of Eden and represents the wisdom of the divine realm. When I look at these works, it seems clear that she is obviously playing a greater role in the conception of the work rather than playing the passive medium completely. There is definitely an interpretive element in these works, in my humble opinion. What do you think? I think this blending of spiritual inspiration with her own dynamic creative abilities is the perfect synergy for any artist. Let's zoom in a little closer to this work. Here we see Hilma has placed two birds together, really forming a unified shape. Perhaps this is the reunion of male and female energies from the original androgen. Perhaps this is the union of yin and yang. In Hilma's work, the two themes that recur over and over are the spiral of spiritual evolution and the union of duality. These paintings you see here were intended to be altarpieces in the temple. They are absolutely stunning in their conception. Hilma might claim she is merely giving some structure to what her spirit guides are presenting to her. Regardless, there is genius here. Notice the pyramid on the left and the inverted pyramid on the right. Again, symbols of not only masculine and feminine energies, but of the ascent and descent between the physical and spiritual planes. And then the golden orb or circle, representing perfect harmony and spiritual wholeness. In her notebooks of the time, we see she has also become fascinated again by the natural world, and in particular, the elemental atomic structure of all that exists. Her mind was extremely active. Intellectually, she was on par with many of the more public philosophers of her time. She filled hundreds of notebooks with her ideas, inspirations, and drawings of what she was receiving and conceiving. Notice the drawings at the top left and right of the pages. It is the spiral as it appears in nature, such as in seashells. The mathematics behind this natural recurring shape is known as the Fibonacci sequence. It is one of the most famous formulas in mathematics. Each number in the sequence is the sum of the two numbers that preceded it. So the sequence goes 0, 1, then 1 plus 0 is 1, then 2, which is 1 plus 1, and so on. So we have 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, and so on. And the mathematical equation describing it is xn plus 2 equals xn plus 1 plus xn, just in case you're interested. That's why I presented this. Those of you who have a mathematical inclination. Through her art, she boldly presented religious ideas, non-objectively. I'll give you a moment to take a look at these, reflecting her understanding of Buddhism. The watercolors of her last years were evocative and brilliant in their expression of feeling and, yes, possible guidance. Let's also take a moment to simply look at a few of them. Upon her death in 1944, Hilma af Klint stipulated that her paintings remain unseen for the next 20 years. Her possible fears and concerns, perhaps still beholden to Rudolf Steiner's opinions and those of her friends, extended beyond her own years on this earth. By strange coincidence, 1944 happened to be the year that Kandisky and Mondrian also died. Don't know if there's some kind of universal serendipity at work there or not. Hilma's big coming out party as an abstract artist wasn't until 1986, when she was included in the show The Spiritual in Art Abstract Painting, 1890 to 1985, at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. There she was included along with the works of her better known peers, Piet Mondrian, Wassily Kandinsky, and Kazimir Malevich. Now, I did learn in my research that there was an exhibition of her abstract works in Sweden in 1980, but it did not get any significant international press. In fact, her home country, Sweden, which is highly secular, still remains a little embarrassed about their native artist claiming guidance from the spiritual realm. But the rest of Europe, and particularly the United States, is waking up to her brilliance. Recently, there was a popular exhibit at the Guggenheim, followed by numerous articles in newspapers and journals. Now, if you're like me, after I've completed research on an artist and realized I missed a wonderful opportunity to view the artist's work, you're probably saying, dang, to yourself or something else. I too wished I had known about Klint in this exhibit a few years back. Klint was prolific in her artistic production. Her total works number well over 1,000 and are available for analysis, in case you're interested, but in a 7-volume series. Recently, a documentary came out titled Beyond the Visible, Hilma af Klint. I watched it in preparation of this presentation and plucked this quote from the film. "You must learn to ignore your fear, for without the will to believe in yourself, nothing good will happen." Hilma certainly did not fear creating as the spirit leads, for she continued painting until her death. But we cannot help but question her decision to heed the well-meaning but bad advice of others. Why didn't she trust those spirits who gave her such inspiration in the first place? Why didn't she trust her own intuition, which told her her art was meant to impact the lives of many? What could have been the impact of her legacy if she had chosen differently? Well, finally, in our own time, we may just find out. Friends, Hilma's life is a lesson for us to heed. Have we allowed the opinions of others to override our own intuition, our own instincts regarding our present and future? If so, perhaps it's time to put those well-intentioned opinions aside and trust the leading of our own spirit. Who knows what legacy we can create if we do?